YouTube says it will stop deleting videos that make false claims of fraud in past US elections. The policy was introduced shortly after the 2020 presidential poll, but YouTube said its clampdown had had a potentially chilling effect on free speech.
And a mass French dictation contest has been held in the Champs-Élysées in Paris. 5,000 people took part in a record-breaking event, sitting at desks set in rows along the famous boulevard.
Many cities in China are installing systems to prevent cheating, as almost 13 million young people prepare to sit this year's university entrance exams. Facial recognition systems will be installed to stop paid test takers.
Iran has reopened its embassy in Riyadh 7 years after Saudi Arabia severed diplomatic ties. The two regional rivals agreed to end their diplomatic rift after negotiations in March mediated by China.
The Vatican says Pope Francis is doing well after his first night in hospital following hernia surgery. Doctors said the 3-hour operation on Wednesday was successful.
Britain's former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has resigned as an MP. Mr Johnson claimed he'd been driven out of Parliament by a committee examining whether he'd knowingly lied about social gatherings at Downing Street that broke COVID lockdown rules.
Novak Djokovic has made tennis history by becoming the first man to win 23 Grand Slam titles. The 36-year-old Serb beat Norway's Casper Ruud in a thrilling final of the French Open in straight sets.
Paul McCartney has told the BBC that artificial intelligence has been used to help create the final Beatles record. He said the technology had been used to extricate John Lennon's voice from an old demo so he could complete the song. It will be released later this year.
Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida has unveiled a range of measures to reverse the declining birth rate. There'll be more financial support for parents and a campaign to change cultural attitudes.
People in North Korea have told the BBC that food is so scarce their neighbours have starved to death. Exclusive interviews suggest the situation is the worst it's been since the 1990s.
Mexico says the warming of its coastal waters is the most likely reason for the recent large increase in the number of birds dying at sea. As the surface temperature rises, fish swim deeper underwater, depriving the birds of food.
The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is having talks with China's top diplomat Wang Yi on the second day of his trip to Beijing. It's unclear if he'll also meet President Xi Jinping.
Scientists in Britain have found that taking a short sleep during the day could be good for the brain. They say napping appears to slow down the shrinkage of the brain that comes with age.
The latest efforts to locate the submersible missing in the North Atlantic appeared to have yielded little. The US Coast Guard said tapping noises had been heard, but a search produced no results. The 5 people on board have just over a day of oxygen left.
The capital of China, Beijing, has registered its highest ever June temperature, more than 40 degrees Celsius. Shanghai recently recorded its hottest day ever for the month of May. Climate change is being blamed for the records.
The parent company of Facebook and Instagram says it will restrict access to news on its platforms for users in Canada. The announcement is Meta's response to a new law that forces tech giants to compensate news outlets.
President Zelensky of Ukraine says he's spoken to Joe Biden about the short-lived mutiny by Wagner mercenaries in Russia. He described their phone conversation as positive. The US Secretary of State said the rebellion had exposed cracks in President Putin's leadership.
Many South Koreans from Wednesday will reduce their official age by 1 or even 2 years. The government has announced it's adopting the internationally accepted system in which a child becomes 1 exactly a year after its birth.
New Zealand's Prime Minister says he's signed trade deals worth over $20 billion with China during his visit to Beijing. Chris Hipkins made the announcement after meeting President Xi Jinping. China is New Zealand's biggest trade partner.
US researchers say China is producing more solar power than the rest of the world combined and looks set to reach its renewable goals 5 years early. They say Beijing is on course to double its renewable energy production by 2025.
시청해 주셔서 감사합니다. 다음 시간에 뵙겠습니다.